Hi, everybody. My name is Srgjan Vidoeski. I'm an ERMA alumni from the generation of 2019 and 20. At the moment, I am based in Brussels, where I work in the energy field. More precisely, I work with energy democracy, energy activism. And my thesis for ERMA was actually steered in that direction as well. So today, in my session of knowledge sharing and this lecture, I'm going to be talking about the intersection between activism, democracy, human rights, and the energy sector, and why this is so important for the future of our society, for our planet, but overall for our environment and for any efforts that we are making now to have a much better sustainability and a sustainable development in future. So the title of today's lecture is precisely Energy Democracy and Energy Activism, as you see it. So what I will be talking about is, after the introduction, I will touch upon green energy transition. What is it? Why it is important to know the basics and its intersection with environment. Then energy justice and energy democracy. What is the theoretical approach of these definitions? But then also how it's translated in real life, how it's translated in practice. And then from there, I will touch upon energy poverty, which was also a major part of my research for the master thesis, where I took the case of Bosnia and Herzegovina and the rights of the energy vulnerable consumers in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Then what is citizen energy, energy activism, some regional and national examples, and not really an open discussion since this is a recorded lecture, but I am going to share some food for thoughts. So, the green energy transition, as we see it from this image here, it really shows the simplicity of the term, meaning we want to make the world greener, brighter. Probably all of you already know what is at stake. We're trying to phase out, and especially on European level, a lot of progress has been made in phasing out fossil fuels and moving from using petrol and gas, anything petroleum based, towards using renewable energy sources. So when we are talking about green energy transition, is precisely replacing what we already know to be damaging for our environment. We already know that these are resources that are depleting. So sooner or later, humanity is going to come to a point to have to find a replacement. So why not do it now? And then we are going to um, do double the benefits for the future generations. We are going to still have resources left if we are strictly talking from a resource point of view. We are going to have resources left for the future generations because who knows how our grandchildren in 1,000 years, what kind of innovation they can do with the existing oil and gas versus what we know now, which is the best way to use it, the most damaging one is it turns out for our planet. So we are doing a generational justice by leaving resources for the future generation. So that's first. And then the second one is, of course, we try to be more in tune with nature, more in tune with uh, the surroundings that we live in. and of course using resources that would not pollute our living areas. And then of course they're also yielding same amount of energy. So when a lot of people talk about energy transition, they quite often say, oh, but what about national energy security? We want to make sure that we are going to have electricity. We want to make sure that we are going to have water. We want to make sure we are going to have internet. The development is not going to stop. Well, maybe it's time for all of us as humanity, society, to rethink what kind of a development do we want? What kind of a growth do we want? Do we want growth that's only measured with GDP per capita or gross GDP? Or do we want a growth that's going to be inclusive of our well-being, both our own individual personal one, but also the well-being of our planet, the well-being of our local community? And this is where the elements of social justice or social transition or socioeconomic or even a political transition come in place and go hand in hand with what energy transition represents, because it is a turning point where we uh, can choose to either replace only the resources, moving from oil and gas towards using wind and solar power, maybe some hydro potential. As we know in the Western Balkans, especially Bosnia and Herzegovina, it's known for its potential. So do we just want to replace the resources one with another, or do we want to use the opportunity that we have for a change and a shift to do a more thorough and a deeper shift, which is going to extend beyond just something as simple as resources? So now, when I explained in brief what is it, uh, why does it matter, then here comes the next question: how should we approach it? So quite often, when we are talking in the context, especially of political science and implementing different policies and strategies, we can think of two main approaches. So it's a top-down approach where our leaders, the government, the political parties that we are voting on the elections, they are going to get together in a room or in or a meeting or in the parliament, but it's still going to be confined to a smaller group of people as much as expertise that I have. And then they're going to draft the law, make the regulation, do the framework, and then trickle it down to the people. Whereas the bottom up approach would be more responsive to the needs of the local communities. So, yes, we can say that, okay, we have one coal mine that is depleting, we need to replace it. We also have a thermal power plant that is producing electricity for half of the country. And this is a good example in my home country, North Macedonia. So we sort of in our country, we took this approach, and I'm not saying that it's good or bad, but it's something that not always necessarily maybe corresponds the needs of the local population, because it's a question how much they were asked. So we can take the coal mine and we can take the thermal power plant and we can say, okay, these two capacities, they are mining and producing electricity from coal. We're going to take away that, we are going to close down the mine, and we're going to build on top of it a solar power plant or a combination of solar and wind. And then that capacity is just simply replaced with this one. Is it an energy transition? Of course it is. But how it's done? Is it bottom up? Not really. It's more top down, where the system that has been already in place has been used to regulate or to even impose a transition. Whereas perhaps if the locals have been more questioned and quizzed, what exactly do they need? How much electricity do they need? Or perhaps in another area, the sun resource or the wind resource is more favorable. So what could be done instead is then creating like a puzzle, smaller and smaller, smaller bubbles of local communities producing whatever they feel is best for their own community, and then still having the same energy transition as you would do by simply replacing. And then here is where activism plays a role. And now advocating for um, any type of these approaches, but especially the bottom up approach, this is then what we would call um, energy activism or green energy transition activism if you want to be longer. So what are the key actors, the key attributes of the energy transition? Are there people who are more important than the others? The simple answer is no. Nobody is more important than the others, and everybody is a key actor in the energy transition. Because if we really want to make a green energy transition that is going to have all the important elements of a social, socioeconomical, political transition, then everybody should be in question. And of course, the experts and the specialists would be there to guide the process, but then it should be done with everybody included. So inclusion is a key word for having a successful green energy transition. So just to show you some statistics, this graph that I've pulled out, it's already a few years older from Eurostat. So we see the immense progress that the European countries are doing. We had the 2020 targets, the 2030 targets. Now, as of 2024, we also have the 2040 targets. So we see that European countries, especially Germany, Sweden, to name one of the two big champions, the Netherlands, Denmark, they follow of the green energy transition. So they're really pushing for making the green energy transition as inclusive, as renewable, and as citizen friendly as possible. So the chain of the green energy transition quite often works in many different areas. So we have the transportation sector, we have the chemical industry, we have the management of forestry and ecology. We also have the the cargo shipping. Aside from the just the generation and the production and the supply of electricity. So many other sectors are included. And why I bring here also the hydrogen is because a lot of people say that the future, and I am a little bit divisive regarding the hydrogen as the future of renewable energy and the green energy transition. But it's a fact that we can come to a point, whether that will be through the green hydrogen or another alternative, where there will be no waste, no damage whatsoever done. So already in the heating and cooling sector, for instance, there are a lot of innovations with heating with heat pumps. So now it's a big trend in the European Union countries to push and to subsidize homeowners and householders to replace their heating systems with heat pumps which use water. So we see that even the water itself can be used as a renewable, 100% renewable energy resource. So it's a matter of time to see if the green hydrogen will be the holy grail of the energy transition as net zero, no emissions not damaging for the environment, or something else will come as the years roll out and the innovation that we see. And then talking about all of this comes down to energy justice. Energy justice is why we are discussing this, why I decided to do my ERMA master thesis on the topic, why it's important to empower everybody to think about uh, their um access to energy, their right to energy. Even if we simply look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, one of the articles says right to well-being. Can we have a well-being in the 21st century without access to electricity, which can impair our education, without access to internet, without access to heating or even cooling in the scorching hot summer months, especially in the southern countries? So it is already becoming a question of human rights. And it has been a question of human rights, but I think that only in the last few years it has entered the mainstream. And then energy justice is precisely about that. It's the ideal state of existence that the needs of everyone are achieved and restored while addressing the issues of distribution or redistribution of the energy resources. So the energy justice is the ideal or the holy grail that we as a society, as humanity, we might never achieve, but we should aim for. And if even if we reach 95%, heck, even 90%, then we are talking about great success, because it would mean that 90% or 95% of humanity has uninterrupted 100%, 24 hours, 7 days a week access to heating, to electricity, to internet, which can greatly contribute to the human right of well-being. So it is a form of social justice. It demands participation and democracy, because unfortunately, without everybody's participation and without everybody's awareness of the importance of energy justice, and then demanding it through, of course, democratic mechanisms that are in place, even if you're talking about protests, then we cannot talk about energy justice if it's not even visible. And then it aims at resolving energy poverty, which nowadays and in the last several years, maybe even decades, but only in the last several years has been recognized and defined as an issue that still persists, unfortunately. We still see a lot of people unable to provide heating, for example, but more on that later. And then it answers Heffron's energy trilemma. So Heffron is one of the academics that created the framework or the theoretical or the conceptual framework of energy justice, defining it as an interdisciplinary concept. And then many other academics afterwards that I took great inspiration from during the preparation of my master thesis for ERMA and research period. So the energy justice that Heffron describes in his trilemma, and then Jenkins and Buzarowski build upon afterwards, consists of equity, security, and sustainability. So we have this tension between affordability and accessibility, and then the environmental sustainability, and then the energy security. So whatever solution that we come, if we want to have energy justice, all of these three aspects have to be satisfied equally. So we need to create equilibrium between finding the most affordable and accessible energy resource for the people that at the same time, for that particular context, is going to be the most sustainable or the least damaging or the least polluting. And at the same time, that energy resource that we are going to tackle and go for, it's going to contribute for the national energy security. So we want to make sure that our local, first of all, community, and then further on our region and our country and the continent have uninterrupted supply of energy. Because with the conflict in Ukraine, the war um, that Russia started in Ukraine, we saw how the energy security, especially for continental Europe, can still be an issue. So we want to make sure that all of these three aspects are in equilibrium. So then we can say, okay, now we reached a point that we have a satisfactory energy justice. It can always expand and it can always rebalance itself. And then aside from the trilemma, there is another trilemma, the trilemma of the aspects of energy justice. So we are defining and then we are talking and then trying to translate it in legal terms. We have the procedural justice because everything needs to be put in the national legal framework. So anything that has to do with policies, changes to the legal framework to make sure that energy justice and the concepts are well translated, that we see an energy transition that is being democratized by the inclusion of everybody. So everything that has to do with creating such a framework is the procedural justice aspect of energy justice. The distributive aspect is the equity. So we don't want to replace, even though it still will be a form of energy transition, but it's not energy justice. It's not an energy just transition. If we just replace an old thermal power plant with a huge um, wind farm or solar power plant that is going to be owned by one company, that it's not the equity that we want to see in the new future world where we have a completed energy transition. So the distributive justice is about sharing the burdens and the benefits, giving the right to the people that if I want to produce my own electricity, I should have no hurdles whatsoever. And then here in this example, you see how the distributive justice is interlinked with the procedural justice. And then the justice of recognition is about um, recognizing. So here I just noticed that in my slides I copied and pasted by mistake, but the justice of recognition is recognizing uh, where and in which context the energy justice needs to be put in place. So here comes then the solving of energy poverty because we recognize through the lens of energy justice which groups of people are not covered by it. And then some food for thought for you. Try to think of examples as those that I shared until now while talking about these three aspects of uh, examples of any other that you can think of. So we have the energy trilemma, which is about the core of the energy justice, its shape, and then these are the colors of the triangle or the aspects. And then the energy democracy is simply the process. You are going to find in the literature several different directions and views on energy democracy, but the most correct one, I would say, and the most righteous one is democratizing the process of reaching out to your energy. So if I want to choose from where I get my energy needs met, or if I want to do them myself, I should have full right to do it. So this is energy democracy. Or simply put, if the energy justice is a state, higher state that it's difficult to see, it's difficult to reach the ideal state of existence. So here it's energy justice. And then the path or the process how to get there, it's energy democracy. And then it includes how the process of energy transition is being managed. So again, we don't want to see one thermal power plant replaced by one giant solar power plant owned by the same company, but we want to see a process that is going to be inclusive, decentralized. So the centralization of the decision making. That yes, maybe in the past only few people decided how the energy sector and the energy system of one country is going to look like. But now it's the time to decentralize and to include the needs of the local communities, broad participation in the policy making, as many local representatives as possible, and again, the voices of the local community. And then the energy democracy resolves and addresses. So, what does it addresses really? It really addresses all these already uh, died out or out on their way systems that will no longer serve in future. And then why energy justice and energy democracy are so important and where is their biggest intersection with human rights is energy poverty. As you can see from the image, uh, this happens throughout Asia, throughout Africa, throughout the Balkans, throughout everywhere throughout Europe. So we have still a lot of people that cannot afford to pay their bills. They cannot provide heating for the families or cooling in summer months. And let's not confuse it with luxury because a lot of people would say, oh, air conditioning, it's a luxury. If it if it stops you from functioning normally, we need to talk about it. We need to discuss why. Then on the other hand, we have wealthy nations or wealthy individual having everything climatized 24/7, whereas still we have people living on candles and without any source of heating for cooking or for heating their homes. So energy poverty is what is very important to understand in this part of my lecture. It's different from income poverty. When we are talking about energy poverty, we're talking about a dynamic state because it can change relatively fast. 1 month, maybe, me or you or anyone that you know will not be able to pay their gas, electricity, or any sort of heating bill. So for 1 month, I might not have access to any heating. That will mean that I am energy poor for that 1 month, but not necessarily mean that I am poor as a general category because I will still have my income ongoing. So the EU Energy Poverty Observatory, Stefan Bujarovsky and Sashka Petrova, one of the founders, and are proud to say Macedonians who managed to define and set the pillars for energy poverty and how to see it through academic and theoretical lens. So they give four main indicators. So the ability to cover utility bills, the low absolute energy expenditure, meaning that I am not able to spend any energy. High share of energy expenditure in income, meaning that I do have my income, so I'm not income poor. However, if 95% of my income goes to energy expenditure, then we're still talking about energy poverty because I will have to struggle and choose 1 day or 1 month between if I should buy food and put food in my fridge for myself and my family, or heating. And in the 21st century, no human should be put in a position to do that. And yeah, a lot of people would say, but why, Srgjan, you're talking about energy poverty when there's so many poor people? There's so many poor people, but then we also don't want that number to increase because, again, it's a dynamic state. However, I have my income, I'm energy poor. Eventually, I can fall off the rails and then really end up in poverty. So it can also be one step towards poverty. So it's always better to prevent. And then, of course, in the UK, in Ireland specifically, you're going to find also the term fuel poverty. Energy poverty, it's more general. So even though the main focus would be heating and cooling, directly interlinked to the well-being of the human, um, whereas fuel poverty is much more strictly connected to the winter months and the heating, whereas energy poverty does include the other utility bills and everything that has to do with the energy resources that we are having at our disposal. And then again, can a wealthy person be energy poor? What about the British royal family or any other royal family? Technically, so here comes where sometimes we need in defining energy poverty. Of course, we need to find an arbitrary definition for all of our national contexts, and they are already. But still, it needs to be contextualized because if I say that anyone not being able to afford to heat more than 20% of their home is energy poor, then of course then the British royal family or any other royal family will going to fall into, or a wealthy person, if they have 10 houses and they're only heating one half of one house during the winter months. So technically, yes, they will be energy poor. Maybe they are not even able to afford to heat all of their 10 houses because maintaining a mansion can be super pricey and expensive. But then do we really put them in a category of energy poor? Theoretically, yes. Practically, it will be, left to the consciousness of those deciding it. It's more anecdotal than anything else. And then here we come to citizen energy. Again, solving energy poverty through energy democracy to reach energy justice, it's all a form of citizen energy. So it's a concept that is promoting active citizen participation in the energy market and an active role of the people in achieving. So it's not just energy justice, but climate neutrality. What does climate neutrality mean? Is that finding a solution to satisfy our needs without damaging the climate and polluting whatsoever. So forms in practice that we see of citizen energy or energy democracy in practice is consumerism. One example, one great example, where I am at the same time producer and a consumer of my own electricity, meaning people that have rooftop solar panels. So very easy example. Then a local community governance of energy projects. It can be a citizen. This can be a citizen energy. Um, this can be either collective replacement of your heating sources that the municipality is subsidizing, renovating or retrofitting the homes of the people in a local community through a project, but not to make the homes pretty, but to replace the windows and the doors and have a good installation. And then energy cooperatives and communities, which actually include all the other two before. So whenever you would hear, if you want to contribute and you want to say that you know about energy activism and you are an activist for citizen energy and you participate in the process of the democratization of the energy sector, in the energy democracy, please support any citizen energy projects in your local community. And then going it even further, it will be one way or one form to support an aspect of human rights, support an aspect of democratization of our societies. Because democratization of the energy transition, it is a democratization of our societies as well. And then briefly, just since you mentioned the cooperatives, you are all familiar about a cooperative. So it's a unit, collection, collaboration of people that are deciding collectively about something, whether that be a production or agriculture, or etc. So in the case of energy, they are energy cooperatives. So they're following the seven international cooperative principles, open and voluntary membership. So whenever someone, we or whoever it is, decides to create an energy cooperative and is going to produce, let's say, energy through its own solar power plant, for instance, everybody benefiting as a member of this solar power plant has to become a member voluntarily. So we cannot force anyone to invest or take part in a project. Democratic member control, meaning that every person, and this is the huge difference between the corporational setup, it's one vote per person. It does not matter how many shares you have. And this makes sure that every single voice is valued. And then the members participate economically, but they also, of course, have the benefits. And then the cooperative is has its autonomy and independence as an entity. It cannot be linked to anything else, corporation, a municipality. So it stands on its own. It has autonomy and independence. Then it provides education, training, and information for its local community, fosters cooperation or builds bridges with other cooperatives, and then it really works on solving local needs. So in the context of an energy cooperative, it is or it should work on solving the energy needs of the local community. And then through the clean energy package, Energy for All, the European Union defined the energy community. So the energy cooperatives fall under an energy community. The definitions are a little bit debatable, a little bit blurry, but let's say that a collection of cooperatives can be an energy community, but also an energy community can stand on its own. And then we have citizen energy communities, and on one hand, and then we have renewable energy communities. So the renewable energy communities are strictly um, built around the renewable energy source, whereas citizen energy communities as equally is about the citizen participation and the energy, regardless of the source of energy. And then all of these terms and everything that I have been talking until now leads to the energy activism. So what we need in order to make sure that we have a just energy transition is a system change. We do not need a climate change. And yes, we can hear nowadays through social media a lot of people saying climate change is not real, it does not exist. People are you're greenwashing. The people like me are trying to damage, etc. So I want to step forward and say that even if these voices have some truth in it or claim to have some truth in it, is the system still at fault? Yes, it is. Do we still have damaged environment? do we still have an environment that sooner or later is going to become unlivable for us as humanity? Yes, we do. So instead of debating whether climate change is real, let's talk about, do we want to survive on this planet and live in harmony with other species? And for that, we need a system change. And then the energy activism starts from that point and builds up and connects to the energy transition. So some of the problems that it's addressing is hijacking of energy resources. We no longer want younger generations, next generations, we no longer want people in a boardroom owning half of the energy, or as a matter of fact, any type of natural resources in our country or in our local community. Climate change, pollution, energy poverty. So when we are talking about energy activism, these are the overarching concerns, let's say, or hot potatoes that we are dealing with. And then how to achieve it um, is, sorry, aims to achieve is the green energy transition, as we talked before, energy justice. We are exercising. So here now we see clearly the interlinking of everything that I discussed until now. So then we aim to achieve energy transition, energy justice. We exercise it through energy democracy and active participation, and we manifest through consumerism, through citizen energy projects. Yes, we can protest, which is a form of energy activism, but coming to a point to build a citizen energy project or a cooperative that is going to withstand test of time and contribute for a local community that's going to involve our family and friends living nearby, now that is a protest that I appreciate. And then some food for thought. And of course, to reach out to me anytime you would like to discuss these topics in much more detail. Should the right to energy be a human right? Even though I touched upon this topic or really went through it in my master thesis, it's still unanswered. Who knows if it ever will be? Because we have many different political ideologies pushing on one or the other side. One would say, oh, nobody should deserve free electricity or internet or water or whatever it is unless they work for it. But then, how can they work for it if they're not enabled to do it? So, should the energy be a human right? How? Why? Why not? And then, how do you see the green energy transition managed in future? Will it be actually just better and more efficient? Take the thermal power plant, remove it, build wind turbines there, it's done. It's going to be done much faster, simpler, easier maybe. I'm not saying not. What would be the repercussions afterwards? Or should we really go into asking every single person in a local community? Or is there a middle ground somewhere in between? What are your thoughts? And then, how do you understand in all of this energy security? And more specifically, the secured energy supply. So I hope you enjoyed the lecture today. Please reach out to me at srgjan.vidoeski@gmail.com if you have any questions or concerns. and I am happy to chat with you and discuss further in much more details any of the topics that I just presented to you today. And again, I'm no expert, I'm no specialist. I just shared everything that I have learned and I have accumulated in this very brief lecture and in a very general way. So please feel free to debunk or discuss or debate anything that you found compelling. Thank you very much for your attention.